In her book, Animal Vegetable Miracle, author Barbara Kingsolver embarks on an experiment. 1 year, attempting to eat only locally grown food. Spoiler alert, it is not easy, but it is very delicious. Her whole family gets in on this experiment, including her 9-year-old, Lily. When they bring home a brood of chickens, Lily turns out to be quite the entrepreneur, and pretty soon she's selling the eggs by the carton. One morning, Kingsolver looks out and sees her neighbors lining up for fresh eggs, and she has to remind her daughter to please save some for the family. Lily says she'd be happy to, for $2.50 a dozen. So Kingsolver tries to reason with her ambitious daughter. After all, before there were eggs, there were chickens, she reminds her daughter. And you guessed it, those chicks were purchased by her mom. And so the young egg mogul is in fact indebted to mom by hundreds and hundreds of dollars, an impossible fortune to a 4th grader. So eventually mother and daughter strike a deal. Lily can carry on, but she'll be working towards paying back that initial debt or investment or gift by way of 2 cartons of eggs per week. At the end of today's gospel story that Phil just told us, Jesus lays out what I started thinking of, his own chicken or the egg situation. He heals Bartamaeus, and then he declares, "Your faith has made you well. Your faith has made you well." And then Bartamaeus, he gets up with new eyes, and he follows Jesus along the way, the text says. Now, the way isn't just literally the road to Jerusalem that he's walking. The way is also, of course, the name that those earliest Christians gave to their religion. And so Bartamaeus becomes the newest follower of Jesus along the way. It's not just a story of healing then, it's also a story of calling. So wait. Okay, does our man Bartamaeus, does he believe in Jesus' power for new life because he's been healed? Or is he healed because he believes? Is his faith the chicken or the egg in this story, gift or precondition? Now, if this feels a little like splitting theological hairs, bear with me. The particular nuance here seems pivotal to me to how we read and interpret these kind of healing or miracle stories in the Bible, and in how we understand the very nature of our faith. We sing that rollicking hymn this morning, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," in part because today many Protestant churches honor Reformation Sunday. And I think on Reformation Sunday, it's worth parsing how we understand those particular dynamics of faith, that strange active, passive dance. Okay, so we have a miracle here, right? A healing, and Mark's gospel serves us up quite a lot of those, and they can be hard to grapple with. As progressive people in 2018 in a scientific age, how do we relate to these? Do we think of it as pure myth or metaphor? Or, on the other hand, do we really think of Jesus as kind of doling out supernatural phenomena like Halloween candy? Like, bam, a healing over here, cast a demon out over there, feast of loaves and fishes over here. Or maybe, if we read more closely, take this own story, if we take Jesus' actual words, is there something else going on? Something more mysterious than sheer superpower, something far more relational at work, some kind of mutual spiritual physics in which our deepest, most begging needs and the vision of the world as it could be somehow reveal to us the divine presence and power that is already there. Because the cause and effect here is a little wonky if you think about it. Okay, so we might expect the story to work like a linear narrative. Jesus heals the guy, so he develops some faith, and he decides to follow Jesus. But if we take Jesus' own word for it, your faith has made you well. Faith and healing and growth actually work much more like a feedback loop or an infinity symbol. Faith both flows from and precedes wholeness. Your faith has made you well. Whatever he means by it, it seems to be one of Jesus' go-to signature phrases. It's repeated in all three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in all kinds of different healing scenarios. Your faith has made you well, he's fond of saying. Or depending on your translation, your faith has made you whole. Your faith has healed you. Your faith has saved you. The Greek word here, sozo, actually more literally translates as saved. And I was thinking about that word saved, salvation, which etymologically, even in English, also contains healing. Salvation, like a salve, it's the same root. Your faith has saved you. Your faith has salved you like a balm. Although in this story, it's all faith. While there's a previous healing of a blind man in Mark where he actually takes saliva to create that salve. Your faith has made you well. Not the faith that he gets from this encounter, but the faith he already had. The faith that was latent within him. As my friend, the poet Christian Wyman says, describing his own experience of coming to God in the midst of illness and suffering, not so much as a conversion, but this is Wyman, as an ascent to a faith that had long been latent within me. Cause and effect can get a little loopy in the life of faith. A question for you. Do you show up to worship here at church in order to encounter God's love in some kind of special way, in this community of radical welcome, in these ancient stories and this soaring music? Do you come to get something? Or has some previous encounter with God's love, some previous encounter that stopped you in your tracks and convinced you of God's love's primacy, compelled you to show up week after week, even when you don't really feel like it, maybe especially then? Are you part of our church because you have faith or because you need it? Okay, here's another. When we mess up, anyone ever messed up? Yeah. Okay. Does God forgive us because we confess that we're just, humble, broken, limited creatures? Or do we only find the courage to really look at ourselves, to hold the mirror up and see ourselves as humble, broken, limited creatures because we trust that God forgives us? Okay, one more question for you. Do you give of yourself? Do you give of your time and your particular skills? And yes, it's stewardship time, so your hard-earned nest egg. Do you give to people and causes that you care about because you feel connected? Because you feel like you have some skin in the game? Or do you feel connected? Do you have skin in the game at all because you've begun to give of yourself? Chicken or the egg, right? Now, our culture teaches us, I'll believe it when I see it. But faith entices us. You'll see it when you believe it. Our culture says, convince me. And our faith sings, have mercy on me. Not to say that there's anything wrong with wanting proof, let me add, with making decisions based on empirical evidence. It's just that sometimes all evidence seems to point to doom and gloom. And still, we must go on, must find a way forward. And faith cannot despair. As Soren Kierkegaard put it, faith actually sees best in the dark. In our worship team Bible study this week, where we were looking at this text, our organist Liz posited that maybe belief and faith are in their own feedback loop, sort of like the generosity and gratitude loop we've been talking about all month. Maybe belief is sort of our side of the deal, but faith is God's gift to us. Thus, our experience of belief and faith are interwoven, somehow both our act and God's gift, both fresh egg and nurturing hen. As the father of the child whom Jesus heals in the previous chapter of Mark puts it so memorably, Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. Bartamaeus, he calls out to Jesus in a similar way, but he says, anyone remember? Son of David, have mercy on me. Now that's the first instance in Mark where Jesus is referred to in this way, Son of David, this sort of messianic kingship line. And this passage comes at the end of his healing outside of Jerusalem. The very next passage is Palm Sunday, so it's about to get really interesting. And he says, Son of David, he recognizes Jesus for who he is in this kind of cosmic sense. He sees him. The irony would not have been lost on Mark's original audience. When the disciples, those in the inner circle, they don't know where the story's headed. But it takes a blind man to really see Jesus for who he is. Son of David, the one who will save us, have mercy on me. It is this initial faith, this seed of faith that compels him to cry out and then allows him to actually be open to receive that grace. Because it's a two-way street, right? Have you ever had an opportunity come your way, but you actually weren't really open to receive it? Or maybe, have you had an opportunity come your way, but there were others there who were actively trying to keep you from receiving it? Let's look at the crowd in the story for a moment. At first, the crowd tries to silence Bartamaeus. Shh, stop it. You're too loud. That's inappropriate. He's a very important guy. He doesn't have time for the Bartamaeus. But his faith cannot be contained. He refuses to be silenced. Son of David, have mercy on me. Reading this story this week, I kept thinking of our beloved transgender siblings who have responded in the wake of last week's terrifying memo leaked from the White House. And they have responded in a way I think Bartamaeus would have approved of. We will not be erased. Bartamaeus will not be erased or ignored. He keeps shouting, crying out, overcoming the crowd's attempts to silence him, overcoming social convention that told him to sit down, overcoming his status on the margins, shunned on the side of the road. He sees Jesus for who he really is. But he also sees himself for who he really is. Where the crowd just sees a beggar, unclean maybe, where the crowd sees only his disability rather than a person with a disability, Bartamaeus, somewhere in that deep place that gives rise to his cry, he knows himself to be worthy of Jesus' time and attention. He knows himself to be worthy of wellness, worthy of wholeness, worthy of mercy. It is this internal sense of worthiness and trust. Call it faith. That is the key that turns this story on its hinges, which stops Jesus in his tracks. My favorite part of the story is after he cries out, the text says, Jesus stood still. Like the eye in the center of a hurricane. I think Jesus is still standing still in the center of the hurricane of our days today. And he says, go, your faith has made you well. And just like that, he realizes he can see. Did it happen before or after Jesus spoke it into being? And he doesn't go, as Phil said, even though Jesus says, go, he comes. He follows Jesus along the way. It takes faith, even a spark or seed or glint of faith, to ask for help in the depths of our own longing. To really believe that we deserve wholeness, that it could be already on its way. And then, what do you know? It turns. That salve, that saving grace turns, and it starts to spin around itself, moving us more deeply, more thoroughly into that life of faith. Chicken, egg, chicken, you get the idea, right? Friends, the anxiety of the crowd in our nation is running high these days. Amen? For plenty of good reasons. After the horrific news yesterday of the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, my prayer today is, would you pray with me? May the God of David, the God of Jesus, have mercy on us. May our faith in God's power for new life heal our wounds, the private ones we nurse in secret, and the collective ones that ache in our shared consciousness. May our faith in humanity's power for good, our faith in legislation that can protect our children, our communities, our most vulnerable, make us well as a nation, reeling from trauma after trauma. May our faith in the healing power of love, stronger than any hate, make us whole, even when we feel divided. And may we keep shouting, have mercy, have mercy. Jesus, help us see again the way that is before us. Amen.